On the distant world of Zorath, far beyond the reaches of the Milky Way, the royal family held unmatched power. The Zorathian Empire ruled over a vast galaxy, rich in culture, wealth, and strength. The empire's royal bloodline was ancient, and its traditions were unshakable. The most important tradition of all was the matchmaking ceremony for the royal family. The princesses of Zorath, once they reached a certain age, were expected to choose a mate who could not only match their power, but also elevate their family's status. Princess Alira, the youngest daughter of the emperor, was different from the other royal daughters. She had been born with a natural beauty that could captivate any crowd. Her green eyes sparkled like the lush forests of Zorath, and her silver hair shone like the brightest star in the sky. Yet, despite her beauty, Alira's life had been marked by a tragic event that had changed everything. Many years ago, when she was still a young girl, an assassin had attempted to take her life. The attack left her severely injured. While she survived, the injury left her unable to walk. No longer able to run or dance like the other princesses, Alira was forced to rely on a specially designed chair to move. In a kingdom where physical strength was revered above all else, her disability was considered a curse. Over the years, Alira watched as the other princesses were courted by powerful suitors from all over the galaxy. Each one was stronger, more capable, and more suited to the throne than she. One by one, they left her behind. They never even bothered to look her way. Alira tried not to let it bother her. She worked hard to prove herself in other ways. She studied the ancient texts of Zorath, mastered the art of diplomacy, and trained in the ways of strategy and politics. Her mind was sharp and her heart was pure. But no matter how much she accomplished, it seemed that her disability was all anyone could see. No one ever cared about her mind, her courage, or her kindness. The other royals whispered behind her back. "She will never rule," they would say. "She is too weak. She cannot stand by the side of a strong prince." Even her own family could not hide their disappointment. One evening, the emperor called his daughters to the grand hall of the palace. The royal court was filled with elegant beings from many different species. The room buzzed with excitement as the emperor spoke about the importance of the upcoming matchmaking ceremony, where the royal princesses would each choose a suitor. This was a tradition that had been passed down for generations. "We are the strongest, the most powerful, and the most noble of all the galaxies," the emperor declared, his voice booming through the hall. "It is time for you, my daughters, to take your place among the greats of the empire. It is time for you to choose your mate, someone worthy of your greatness." Alira sat in her chair at the back of the room, feeling the weight of the emperor's words press down on her. She had long given up on finding a suitor. No one would choose her, not with her disability. Her father, who had always been a proud man, could never accept such a union. The idea of a prince or king pairing with a disabled princess was unthinkable in Zorathian society. As the ceremony began, Alira quietly watched the other princesses. Their suitors were strong and tall, filled with charm and power. They walked with an air of confidence, every move calculated and perfect. Alira felt small and out of place, despite being a part of the royal family. Then something unusual happened. Among the many suitors, there was one who was different. He was not Zorathian, nor was he any of the usual species that came to court, the princesses. He was human. His name was Captain Daniel Hayes, and he was a representative of the Human Alliance, a small but growing faction in the galaxy. Alira had never met a human before, but she had heard whispers of their strange ways. Humans were known for their resourcefulness, their unpredictable nature, and their strong-willed spirits. They were not as physically imposing as some of the other species, but they had a reputation for overcoming incredible odds. Captain Hayes had entered the hall wearing the standard military uniform of his people. It was simple, not adorned with jewels or medals, but there was something about him that stood out. His eyes were full of curiosity and intelligence. He was not interested in impressing anyone with his physical appearance or wealth. Instead, he seemed intrigued by the history of Zorath itself. As the other suitors surrounded the princesses, Captain Hayes walked toward Elira. His gaze met hers, and for the first time in a long time, Elira felt something she had never expected: respect. "Your Highness," he said politely, bowing slightly in her direction, "it is an honor to meet you." Elira blinked, surprised by his direct approach. Most people, even those who had spoken to her before, treated her as if she were fragile or invisible. But Captain Hayes treated her like an equal. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure of how to respond. "It is a pleasure to meet you as well." "I've heard a great deal about your world, Princess," Captain Hayes continued, his voice kind. "I must admit I find your planet fascinating, the culture, the history, and the strength of the Zorathian people. But I also sense something more here, something rare." Elira felt a rush of warmth in her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I see a strength in you, one that goes beyond physical ability. Your mind, your heart. Those are the qualities that truly matter," he said with sincerity. "And in my experience, those are the qualities that make a true ruler." Elira's heart fluttered in her chest. She had never heard such words before, not from any of her suitors. Her heart pounded faster, and for the first time, she felt like someone truly understood her. The conversation between them was brief, but it was enough to leave Elira thinking. As the gala continued, she found herself watching Captain Hayes from across the room. He was unlike any other suitor, not just because he was human, but because he treated her with kindness and respect. He saw beyond her disability, beyond the wheelchair that she relied on, and he valued her for who she was inside. That night, as Elira lay in her chambers, she couldn't help but think about their conversation. Could it be possible that someone like him, someone from a completely different world, could see her differently? Could he be the one to offer her a future, one where she was not bound by the limitations that the Zorathian court had placed on her? As she drifted into a restless sleep, Elira couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. The grand halls of the Zorathian palace were quiet by the time the royal gala came to an end. The night had been long, filled with conversations, laughter, and exchanges of culture between the various dignitaries from across the galaxy. Yet, despite the celebratory atmosphere, Princess Elira could not shake the thoughts of the human she had met earlier that evening. Captain Daniel Hayes had not only treated her with respect, but he had seen something in her that few others had. Elira had long accepted the fact that her disability would keep her from living the life she had once imagined. As a child, she had dreamed of being courted by a brave and strong prince, someone who would fight by her side and help her rule their people. But those dreams had shattered when the assassination attempt had left her unable to walk. Since then, her royal duties had been about appearances, diplomacy, and playing her part in keeping the empire strong. Romance, love, and companionship had seemed like far-off concepts, things reserved for those who could stand on their own 2 feet. But Captain Hayes was different. His words echoed in her mind long after he had left the gala. He had seen her as more than just a disabled princess. He had seen her strength, her mind, her heart. And for the first time in years, Elira felt a glimmer of hope. Could it be that someone could love her for who she was and not just the title she carried? Could it be possible that love, true love, could come from an unexpected place, like a human from a distant world? The following days were filled with rumors and whispers, most of them focused on the human ambassador and his encounter with the princess. Some of the court believed that Captain Hayes had been too bold in his approach, suggesting that his motives were not entirely pure. Others, however, whispered that perhaps Elira had found a suitor who might actually value her for who she truly was. Elira did her best to ignore the gossip. She spent most of her time in the royal library, studying ancient texts on diplomacy and strategy. Her duties as a princess demanded that she be well versed in these matters, and she had always found comfort in books. They were her escape, her refuge from the expectations placed upon her. Yet no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts always returned to the human ambassador. One afternoon, as Elira sat alone in the library, she heard a soft knock on the door. It was a familiar sound, one she had heard many times over the years. Her personal servant, Lena, entered the room with a tray of fresh fruit and tea. "Your Highness," Lena said with a bow. "There is a visitor for you." Elira's heart skipped a beat. Could it be him? Could it be Captain Hayes? She quickly adjusted her gown and gave Lena a nod. "Send him in." Lena stepped aside and Captain Hayes entered the room. His tall frame seemed to fill the space, yet his presence was calm and kind. He wore his usual military uniform, simple yet dignified, and his dark hair was neatly combed. He smiled warmly as their eyes met. "Princess Elira," he said with a respectful bow, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Elira's heart raced, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Not at all, Captain Hayes. I'm pleased to see you again." Captain Hayes set the tray of fruit and tea down on the table and took a seat across from Elira. The air between them was filled with an unspoken tension, a feeling neither of them had anticipated but both had sensed. For the first time, Elira felt a connection that was deeper than mere politeness or formality. There was an understanding between them, a shared moment that made everything else in the world seem insignificant. "I wanted to come by and see how you were," Captain Hayes said, his voice soft. "The gala was quite an event, wasn't it?" "It was," Elira replied. "But I must admit, I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation." Hayes looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and understanding. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been thinking about it too." Elira felt her heart beat faster, unsure of how to proceed. There were so many things she wanted to ask, but at the same time, she was afraid. She had been let down so many times before, by suitors who saw only her disability, who couldn't look past it to see the person she truly was. But Hayes, he was different. His words had shown her a side of herself she had almost forgotten. "I don't understand," Elira said softly. "Why would you choose me? I have nothing to offer. I'm not like the other princesses." "I'm different?" Captain Hayes interrupted gently. "Princess, you are more than enough. You don't need to be like anyone else. I've spent a lot of time in different parts of the galaxy, meeting all kinds of people, but you're special. You have a mind that can rival the greatest leaders, a heart that's pure, and a strength that comes from within, not from your legs." Elira's eyes widened. "But I'm weak," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I cannot walk. I can't do the things that others can do. I can't even rule like my father does or fight in the battles like my sisters. I am not worthy of a mate, not in the way the others are." Captain Hayes leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Strength isn't just about what you can physically do. It's about what you can inspire in others. It's about the way you see the world and the way you make people feel. And in my eyes, you are stronger than most people I've met." Elira's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like this. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Truly seen for the first time. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to say anything," Hayes replied, his tone gentle. "I'm not here to pressure you. I'm here to offer you a choice, a chance for something real if you want it." Elira sat in silence, processing his words. A part of her wanted to say yes, to accept his offer and begin a new chapter of her life, free from the expectations that had always weighed her down. But another part of her was afraid. She had spent so many years convincing herself that she didn't need love, that she didn't deserve it. Could she really allow herself to open her heart again? Finally, Elira looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a hint of hope. "And if I choose you, what happens next?" Captain Hayes smiled, a warmth in his expression that made Elira's heart flutter. "We take it one step at a time," he said. "We build something together, something real. You don't have to decide everything today, Princess. But just know that whatever choice you make, I'll be here for you." For the first time in a long time, Elira felt a sense of peace settle over her. The world outside the palace seemed so distant, so insignificant compared to the conversation she was having now. She had been given a choice, a rare and precious gift. She had the power to decide her future, to choose who she wanted to be with, not because of her title or her disability, but because of who she truly was. I need time to think," Elira said quietly. "This is all so overwhelming." Hayes nodded, understandingly. "Of course. Take all the time you need, Princess. I'm not going anywhere." As he stood to leave, Elira watched him go, her heart heavy with both fear and hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt as though it was in her hands. The days that followed Captain Hayes's visit were filled with uncertainty. Princess Elira spent her time in quiet contemplation, lost in thought. The offer he had made weighed heavily on her mind, challenging everything she had believed about herself and her place in the Zorathian Empire. It was hard to shake the feeling that something monumental had shifted within her. She had been given a choice, something she had never truly had before. But with that choice came the fear of the unknown. In the quiet hours of the night, Elira would often find herself looking out over the palace gardens, the cool breeze carrying the scent of the flowers that bloomed under the twin moons of Zorath. She had grown up in this palace, surrounded by the comforts of royalty, but it felt like a prison. The grand halls, the fine silks, and the jewels were beautiful, but they had never filled her heart the way the simple kindness of Captain Hayes had. Yet even as she felt drawn to him, she could not ignore the voices of doubt that echoed in her mind. Her father's words, spoken countless times during her childhood, rang loud in her ears. "The royal bloodline is what matters most, Elira. Your position is your greatest strength. Never forget that." And yet, what had her position given her? Her disability had made her a figurehead, a symbol of weakness, not strength. Her father's insistence on tradition and power had isolated her, leaving her to watch from the sidelines as others, more able and more worthy, took center stage. Her disability had cost her everything she had once hoped for. As Elira sat in her chamber one morning, staring at the ornate mirror that hung on the wall, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. Her door swung open, and her older sister, Princess Lyra, entered the room without waiting for a response. "You've been avoiding everyone, Elira," Lyra said, her tone sharp and commanding. "The council is beginning to talk. You need to make a decision about the human." Elira frowned, turning away from the mirror. "I haven't been avoiding anyone," she replied quietly. "I've just been thinking." Lyra crossed her arms, a look of concern crossing her face. "Thinking? About what? About that human? You can't be serious. We both know that he is not the right match for you." Elira's heart sank. She had expected her sister's reaction, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it feel more real, more painful. "Why not?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He's kind, respectful, and he sees me for who I am, not just my title." "Why can't that be enough?" Lyra's expression hardened. Because you are a princess, Elira. You are the future of this empire. A human, someone from a lesser world, cannot be your mate. It would be a disgrace to our family and to the entire Zorathian Empire. Do you want to see us fall from the position we have held for centuries? Elira's face flushed with frustration. What if my position means nothing if I can't be happy? What if all I want is to be seen as more than just a title? I don't want to live a life of loneliness and expectations. Lyra's eyes softened for a moment, but she shook her head. You don't understand, Elira. You have no choice. The Empire needs you to make the right decision. You cannot choose someone based on what makes you feel good in the moment. You have a duty, and that duty is to the Empire. The words stung more than Elira wanted to admit. She had always admired her sister, but now she saw how deeply Lyra believed in the rules that had kept them bound to tradition. Elira felt a sudden wave of loneliness. Even her own family, the people who should have supported her, couldn't understand the pain she was feeling. You don't understand me at all, Elira whispered, turning her gaze to the window, unable to meet her sister's eyes. Lyra hesitated before speaking again. I know this is hard for you, Elira, but you have to choose. The Emperor is already aware of your interactions with Captain Hayes, and he's not pleased. Elira froze. My father knows? Lyra nodded. The court is already buzzing with the news. They will expect a formal response soon. The Emperor will never allow a human to be your mate. Elira's heart raced. She had known that her father would disapprove, but the weight of his disapproval was heavier than she had anticipated. The very idea of losing his favor, of being cast aside by her own family, was terrifying. You must end this now, Lyra said gently but firmly. It is for the best, Elira. The Empire comes first. The words hung in the air, suffocating her. She had always been a dutiful daughter, always trying to meet her father's expectations. But now, for the first time, she had to choose between her family and her heart. Later that afternoon, as Elira sat in the royal gardens, the weight of her sister's words pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had always believed that love could conquer all, that it was the greatest force in the universe. But as she looked out at the magnificent palace, she wondered if that belief was nothing more than a fantasy. Her father had never cared for fantasies. He cared about power, tradition, and the future of the empire, and she was supposed to carry that future on her shoulders. Captain Hayes had asked her for something simple, to be his mate. But now it seemed that nothing was simple. The choices before her were anything but. If she chose him, she would lose everything: her family, her place in the Empire, and her connection to Zorath. But if she chose to reject him, she would lose the only chance at real happiness she had ever known. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Princess, I've been searching for you. Elira turned to see Captain Hayes standing at the entrance to the garden. His face was calm, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. He had come, as he had promised, to see her once again. You're here, Elira said, her voice betraying a mix of emotions. I wasn't expecting to see you today. Hayes walked toward her, his steps slow and measured. I wanted to give you time, he said quietly. But I couldn't stay away. I know you've been struggling with this decision, and I don't want to pressure you. I just want you to know that I'm here, whatever you decide. Elira felt a rush of warmth at his words. His honesty, his understanding, made the decision feel less daunting, even though she knew that her path would be difficult no matter which direction she chose. I'm not sure what to do, she admitted, her voice trembling. My family is pressuring me. They want me to make the right choice for the Empire, but I can't help but wonder if there's more to life than duty and tradition. Hayes took a step closer to her, his voice low and steady. Princess, I don't know the customs of your world, but I do know that no one should be forced into a life of unhappiness. You deserve a choice, and if that choice is me, I will stand by you." Elira's heart ached. But what if I lose everything? What if I lose my place here? My father's love? What if the Empire turns its back on me? Hayes reached out, gently touching her arm. "You don't have to lose anything, Elira. The Empire will change. You can be the change it needs. If you choose me, I will help you fight for what's right. Together we can build a future that includes both love and duty." Elira closed her eyes for a moment, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. She had been raised to believe that duty came first, that the Empire was everything. But now, standing in front of Captain Hayes, she realized that there was something else that mattered even more. Her happiness. I need to think," Elira said softly, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Hayes nodded, giving her space. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As he turned to leave, Elira watched him go, her heart torn between the Empire she had always known and the love she was beginning to believe could be hers. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt as though she had the power to choose her own destiny. The following days passed in a blur of worry and uncertainty. Princess Elira spent most of her time in her chambers, pacing the floor, her mind racing with the weight of the decision she had to make. Captain Hayes's words echoed in her thoughts. He had offered her a choice she had never been given before. But with that choice came a storm of consequences, both personal and political. Her father, the Emperor, had made his disapproval clear. The moment Elira had mentioned her thoughts on the human captain, the Emperor's anger had been palpable. His disappointment had cut deeper than she expected. As the ruler of the Zorathian Empire, he had never been one to tolerate challenges to tradition, and he had made it clear that any relationship between Elira and a human would not be accepted. "You are the future of this empire, Elira," he had said with a sharp tone. "You cannot throw it all away for a passing fancy. A human is not suitable for you, nor for our people." But the more Elira thought about it, the more she realized that her father's expectations were not her own. She had always tried to meet his standards, to do her duty as a princess, but now, for the first time, she questioned whether duty alone could give her the happiness she craved. Elira knew the Empire needed her. It needed her to be strong, to uphold the legacy of the royal family. But could she truly be the ruler they needed if she was miserable? Could she lead them with a heart full of regret? She didn't think so. She didn't want to live her life simply fulfilling the expectations of others. She wanted a life of her own, one where she was seen for who she was, not just as the princess who could not walk, but as a woman capable of love and choosing her own destiny. One evening, as the twin moons of Zorath began to rise, casting a soft light over the palace gardens, Elira made her decision. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but it felt right. She had thought long and hard, and now she was ready to face whatever consequences lay ahead. The next morning, Elira summoned her most trusted servant, Lena. She had always been there for her, offering comfort and support, and Elira needed her more than ever. "Lena," Elira said, her voice firm but filled with uncertainty, "I have made my decision." Lena looked up from the task she was working on, her face softening when she saw the seriousness in Elira's eyes. "What have you decided, Your Highness?" "I'm going to see him," Elira replied. "I'm going to choose Captain Hayes. I know the consequences, but I can no longer live my life only for the Empire. I need to live for myself." Lena's eyes widened, and she stepped closer to Elira. "Your Highness, are you sure? You know that the Emperor will not approve. There will be consequences. The court will never accept it." "I know," Elira said, her voice steady, "but I have to do this. I can't keep pretending that I don't have a choice. I've spent my whole life doing what others expect of me, but I can't do it anymore. I need to be true to myself. Lena took a deep breath, clearly torn between her loyalty to the princess and her concern for the consequences. After a moment of silence, she nodded. "I understand, Your Highness," Lena said softly. "I will support you whatever happens, but please be careful. The path you are choosing is not an easy one." "I know," Elira whispered, "but it's the path I need to walk." That evening, Elira made her way to the palace gates, her heart racing in her chest. She had never been so sure of something in her life, and yet she felt a deep fear at the same time. She had never done anything like this before. She had always been confined to the palace, following the rules, fulfilling her duties. But now she was stepping into the unknown. As Elira approached the gates, she saw Captain Hayes standing near the entrance, waiting for her. His presence was comforting, like a beacon in the darkness. He had been patient with her, never rushing her, always respecting her need for time. But now, Elira knew that the time had come. Captain Hayes turned as he heard her footsteps, and when their eyes met, something inside Elira shifted. There was no need for words. She could see it in his eyes, the hope, the trust, the love he had for her. And she realized in that moment that she felt the same way. She was ready to take the leap, to choose a future with him. "You came," Hayes said, his voice filled with relief. "I came," Elira replied softly. "And I choose you. I choose a life with you, no matter what happens." Hayes stepped forward, his expression one of pure joy. "You don't know how much that means to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you, we will face whatever comes together. You won't have to do this alone." Elira smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Free to choose her own path. Free to love without fear. But as the moment passed, a shadow seemed to fall over them. Elira turned her head slightly, sensing that something was wrong. She looked toward the palace and saw a group of royal guards marching toward them, led by none other than her father, the emperor. His face was stern, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. "Elira!" the emperor called, his voice booming, across the courtyard. "What is this madness? What do you think you're doing?" Elira's heart sank as she turned to face her father. "Father, I've made my choice," she said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. "I choose Captain Hayes. I choose love over duty." The emperor's eyes narrowed and he stepped forward, his voice cold and harsh. "You are a princess, Elira. Your duty is to the empire, not to some human from a distant world. You will not bring disgrace upon this family, and you will not betray the Zorathian Empire." Elira took a deep breath, standing tall despite the weight of her father's fury. "I am not betraying the Empire. I am choosing to live my life, to choose my own happiness. I know the consequences, but I will not live in a cage of tradition and fear any longer." The emperor's eyes flickered with anger, but Elira could see the flicker of something else. Regret, perhaps. He had always demanded so much of her, but in that moment she knew that he did not understand what it truly meant to live. To be happy, to love. "You are making a mistake, Elira," the emperor said, his voice low. "But if this is truly your choice, there is nothing I can do to stop you. But know this, if you choose him, you will be cast out of this family, cast out of the empire. You will have nothing left." Elira's heart clenched at her father's words. But she knew she had made the right decision. "Then I will face it," she said quietly. "But I will not be alone. I have Captain Hayes, and I have myself." Captain Hayes stepped forward, his hand gently resting on Alira's arm. "We'll face it together, Your Highness," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. "Whatever comes, we'll face it side by side." The Emperor looked at them both, his eyes filled with a mix of anger, disappointment, and perhaps something else, a glimmer of respect. But it was too late now. Alira had made her choice, and there was no turning back. Alira knew that the road ahead would be difficult. She would lose much, her family, her title, her place in the empire. But she had gained something far more precious, the freedom to live her own life, to love without fear, and to choose her own destiny. And in that moment, standing next to Captain Hayes, she knew that whatever challenges they would face them together.